Oh, yeah, we're live here on This Comic Cooks. Something different I wanted to try today. I got a chance to watch a little movie called Selling Superman on video on demand. I actually pre ordered this and I was very excited to see it. But I wanted to talk about my experience with this movie and maybe if you are interested in comic books or in Superman, then you'll be interested in this documentary as well. It started off with just, okay, selling Superman. I had heard the story. Someone found a collection of comic books in their closet. It was their dad's collection, and it was worth millions of dollars. So, oh, okay, that's interesting. I think it'll be about Superman. It'll be about comic books, but it is all those things. It's about Superman. It's about comic books, but it's about a whole lot more. It is the story of a man and his family, and the dynamics between himself, his younger brother, his father. So this whole family, how they were affected by this one man's decision, which is the father's, to have this comic book collection. And what does that mean for his family? So I found all of these things fascinating, just a ton of psychological and moral, ethical, all these things are very interesting and floating through my mind. So I want to talk about it here on the channel and see if you're interested, like I said. So the first thing is the nature of collecting. What does it mean to have a collection of something and attach meaning to that collection? In the documentary, they go over it and they talk about how the main collector, the father, almost turned into a golem like figure from Lord of the Rings, where it was my precious, the collection was the one thing that mattered more to him than anything else in his life. And it started to not corrupt him, but I think he had some other issues going on. Originally, it was diagnosed as Asperger's, and then it's no longer called that now. But he had this mental addiction, or well, he had an addiction also, but an affliction. And the way that he related to his children, and me being a father now, it hits me differently when I see things like this. And how are people's relationships with their children affecting the children? I think about that every day with my own son. What type of man is he going to turn into? What type of person is he going to be? It is probably my most important job in the world to make sure he is a good person, make sure he turns out and he is provided for, he has a chance in this world. So it, like I said, it hit me hard when I saw the father's relationship with the sons was affected in a negative way because he didn't seem to want to do this collection for his children. He didn't say, okay, this is your college savings fund. This is what I want you, I want to pass down my legacy to you. He didn't share that he was collecting with his children. He didn't share that joy of finding, like, he had so many rare finds in this collection, the top two being Superman #1 and Batman #1. But he would have 150 copies of Silver Surfer's first appearance and 150 copies of Star Wars #1. So it goes beyond that, just love of the actual thing itself, the joy of comic books. What do comic books mean to you, and the storytelling that is found in comic books? It can't be found in any other medium. It's unique, it's rare, and it's something that I want to share with everyone that I talk to and everyone I know. So for this father to not share that with his children was kind of heartbreaking to me. And then he didn't want to pass on even the collection side of it. And hey, here's the monetary value you can ascertain from this. It's not, basically, to me, it's like two ways. You can either think of it as here's a collection I'm passing down to you and you can read it, you can enjoy it. He wasn't doing that. Or here's something that is going to be worth something in the future. I want to pass this down to you so that you have financially a good standing as well. So for the father not to do either one of those, it was very interesting to me, just like, what is his motivation? And he never shared it with his children. And then at the end of his life, he kind of went down mentally, cognitively. It just slowly declined to the point where he was seeing people. He was like not all there. And so they weren't able to, ask him. He didn't leave a trust or a will. And it's crazy because he was a lawyer in his actual living. That's how he made a living, was he was a lawyer, but he didn't have anything set up for his children, which is another thing for me as a father. I haven't done that myself, but I also want to kind of make sure that everything is in line. If something happens to me, my son is set up, and my wife. So those are the most important things to me. It's weird that they weren't the most important things to him. And, I didn't know the man, so I couldn't speak 100% to his experiences. But was it the mental side of it that caused him not being able to relate emotionally to his family? Those were some very like heavy things. And I was not prepared for when I was watching this. And they focus in on the mother, and she ended up divorcing him, and her struggles of, yeah, I lived a good life, but at what cost? My husband, he never left the house. Like, he became so guarded and protected of this collection. Like I said, kind of that Smeagol, Gollum, Lord of the Rings connection there of like, this is so precious to him. He won't enjoy life. He won't have a life with his family. And it was a little bit of a double-edged sword because he did that. Okay, he ended up protecting this collection. The comics were a huge value because he did that. If he hadn't done that, let's say maybe he wasn't as protective of the collection, maybe they would have gotten worn out, the value would have gone down. But, at what point is it a trade-off of the enjoyment of the thing versus what are you going to see as a lasting legacy beyond your years? After you pass away, then what's going to happen to that? And for me, myself, I want to have a high both. I want the leveling system. I want it to be equal, and I want to leave something for my son. I want to leave a legacy, which is also kind of like what I want to do here on YouTube. But I also want to enjoy life. I want to enjoy the things that I enjoy, and I want my son to enjoy those things. So just the nature of collecting, having physical things, it hit me as, man, this is something that, I've thought about it before with comic books and physical media, physical things takes up a huge amount of space. And what do you do if you don't have an archive, like a museum, a place to store all these things? And you saw in the documentary what it ended up for his family, ended up being like taking up rooms in his house, taking up spaces where they couldn't go. And what type of, like I said, what type of life is that? And his mother was like, yeah, we were taken care of because of his lawyer job, but emotionally we were not taken care of. You could see it in her face, like the pain that it caused her, because she said she was so focused on raising her two sons that was it worth it? Was that collecting worth it? Very interesting to think about all those things and ramifications of that, because the son himself, he's financially set, he's well off. It was like he was in the documentary, he ended up selling parts of the collection to pay for housing and storing and grading the comics. So it's almost like that snake eating its own tail. Like, he wasn't able to benefit from that. Also, the other son, maybe a little bit of autism, seemed like he had some speech problems and mental cognitive development problems. But that only comes out in the third episode. It's a 4-part documentary, which if I didn't bury the lead here, I highly recommend Selling Superman. It was a very interesting, fascinating watch for me. Like I said, on all these levels that I was not expecting. I was only looking at the Superman side or the comic book side, but I actually ended up being more fascinated. Now, that was a fascinating story, him trying to sell this collection. And how do you, like, it's so unwieldy. How do you store these comics? How do you find people to value them? Because he was not himself a comic book collector. So he didn't know, hey, how do I sell these things? How do I grade them? How do I value them? So seeing that was interesting, that whole journey. But then also, like I said, it was unexpected to find, man, it's really about the father and son relationship, the husband and wife relationship, the brothers relationship. There's a huge thing that it goes into in the documentary where the mother is upset with the older brother because she felt like he was not taking care of the younger brother. Like I said, he had some developmental issues. He had some things where you could tell that took up the majority of his mental cognitive functioning. And man, how do I deal with this? A dad who is not there for me and didn't leave a set of instructions for this, because on the one end he wanted to take care of his dad's collection. He wanted to, do right by his dad, but then he didn't know what was doing right by him. Hey, if I sell these, is he going to be upset? If I, what were his wishes for these comics and for this thing? So I found all of that stuff interesting. Something about passing down this legacy to your children. I found that to be personally something that is interesting to me, because I'm looking at that in my life right now about what do I leave for my son? What is my legacy to my son? Passing that down. There's the consumerism aspect of it, of do you value these things because they're going to go up in value? And they talk about collectibles, trading cards, action figures. The father was collecting all of these things. What was it about that in his mind? Like, I really would, it would have been great to interview the father. Unfortunately, he passed away. So we didn't get a lot of these insights into his thinking and mindset of what did you want? What were your goals in life? And if you're going to, like, maybe he took joy in protecting the collection, and they showed he put up tarps on the windows and never wanted to go on vacation because he didn't want the collection to be stolen. He didn't want people breaking in. It was like Fort Knox, the secret of him having comic books. Like, he never told anyone. The wife, you could tell after she's been divorced, this guy passed away, she's still scared to talk about it because she had spent so many years closed up. And what was that like? Man, all of these things were interesting to me. Like I said, the consumerism aspect of it. And I love comic books. I want to share comic books. That's why I really like digital, because I get the stories, I get what I want out of the comics, and I don't have to worry about storing them. It's all digital. Either the files are in the cloud, or I can have them in my digital library and collection. So that was another fascinating aspect of the documentary to me. Like I said, it deals with comic books, talking about the industry. It interviews some YouTubers, which I found interesting, talking about superheroes in general. This documentary was very well executed, I would say, because they had 4 parts. It wasn't like a 2-hour documentary. They had about an hour each for each part to it, and they were able to explore all these themes. And I was very satisfied as a comic book fan, as a superhero fan, and as a dad, as a family man. It hit me on all these levels that, like I said, I was not expecting, but I enjoyed it. I felt it was very well done from a documentary standpoint, looked great. I really enjoyed the insight and the introspection of myself, of looking into, okay, how would I deal with this if it was my family? And also, what insights can I take from this and apply them to my own life? So, man, this Selling Superman, I highly recommend it. There's some things in here about addiction. What are your vices, right? Like, they interviewed a pastor and they showed him at church talking, and it was like, hey, I don't want to tell my wife how much I spent on this because she is not going to be happy with me, but it's the addiction, and it's like that high and that dopamine hit. So there's some mental health stuff in here. They talked to a psychiatrist. There's a lot of stuff that was interesting about this one man's decision. How did it affect his family's life, people around him, and then just the interesting aspect of selling Superman #1. It was one of the 4 best copies on Earth. There's a moment in the documentary where it gets a little dicey of, did they protect this while they were filming the documentary? Did they protect this asset, this #1 Superman? Very interesting. And, overall, how did that affect the family? A comic book collection of 300,000 comic books. And you think about, like I said, the storage aspect of it, the monetary aspect of it, all of these things. What does that mean? And it's just a thing that you weren't expecting to find. So as I was watching it, just layer after layer kept peeling back, I really enjoyed my time with Selling Superman. And if you like this comic cooks, or if you're new to this channel and you are liking those things, comic books, superheroes, family, all of those things, you will enjoy Selling Superman. So highly recommend it. I'll leave a link in the show notes to let you know where you can find it. But man, if you guys see any more documentaries like this, let me know. Send them my way. I highly recommend Selling Superman. So thank you very much for joining me. I will catch you next time on This Comic Cook.